The swamp never truly slept, only waited. It waited the way a patient man waits outside a locked door, knowing the key will turn eventually. In the summer of 1857, the swamp around Pryor's Landing in New Madrid County, Missouri, was a living thing. Black water thick with cypress knees, air so wet you could wring it out like a wash rag, clouds of mosquitoes that rose in gray curtains at dusk. The Mississippi curled around the Bootheel like a brown serpent too lazy to strike, and the smell was always the same: rot and green growing things, death feeding life and life feeding death in the same breath. White men called it hell with good reason. Black folks called it home when there was nowhere else to go. Cato had come to Pryor's Landing in the spring of 1844, 29 years old, 6 feet 3 inches of long muscle and silence. The trader's bill of sale, still nailed yellowing in Elijah Pryor's office, listed him as prime field hand, quiet disposition, no marks, $600. A bargain. Elijah Pryor liked bargains almost as much as he liked quiet. He learned different. The quiet was not obedience, it was listening. Cato listened to everything. The way the wind shifted before a storm, the way a whip cracked a half-second before it landed, the way Master Elijah's breathing changed when he was drunk and looking for someone to hurt. Cato listened and remembered, and because he never spoke unless spoken to, people forgot he was doing it. They remembered in 1849. That winter a new overseer arrived, Silas Greer, fresh from Arkansas with a face like a hatchet and a taste for blood. On the third day, Greer decided Cato had looked too long at the big house while carrying water buckets. He tied Cato to the whipping post at sunset, took a skinning knife, and opened the man's throat from ear to ear, shallow enough not to kill quick, deep enough to ruin the voice forever. Blood poured hot and bright. Cato dropped to his knees, choking on it, eyes wide, hands clawing at the dirt. Greer laughed and told the others to leave him there as a lesson. He lay in the mud for 3 days. Fever cooked him. Flies laid eggs in the wound. On the 4th morning, Aunt Dicey, the root woman who had buried more children than she had kept, poured a tea of willow bark and spiderweb down his throat and stitched the gash with a strip of rawhide. Cato stood up on the 5th day. The scar ran angry red from jaw to collarbone, and when he tried to speak, only a rasp came out, like wind through dead leaves. From that day forward, they called him Whisper. Children scattered when his shadow crossed the door. Grown men looked away. Women crossed themselves even though the preacher said it was Catholic nonsense. Cato went back to the rice ditches at dawn and worked until the horn blew at dark, same as always, saying nothing, hearing everything. 8 years passed. 8 years of backs flayed open, of women dragged screaming to the big house, of babies sold before they could walk. 8 years of Delphi. Delphi came in the spring of 1856, small and quick, skin the color of river silt after rain, eyes that laughed even when her mouth didn't dare. She was assigned to the laundry, and the first time Cato saw her, she was beating shirts against a rock, singing low under her breath, something in a language nobody on Pryor's Landing knew. Their eyes met across the steam, and something passed between them that needed no words. They had no marriage paper. Paper could be torn up or sold. They had each other, and by the winter of 1856 they had a baby coming. Cato carved a tiny cradle from cypress wood at night and hid it under his pallet. Delphi rubbed her belly and smiled when no white person was looking. July 1857 was the hottest anyone could remember, the kind of heat that made men mean and women miscarry. On a Thursday so thick you could chew the air, Elijah Pryor stood on the gallery drinking lemonade while Silas Greer dragged Cato to the barn for another lesson. Same crime, looking too long. This time the whip had bits of metal braided into the lash. 39 strokes, counted out loud by Thomas Pryor, the youngest son, who laughed every time the metal bit, flesh and blood spattered the dirt. Cato passed out on the 27th stroke. When he woke, the sun was low and red behind the cypress, and Delphi was gone. They told him later she had been taken into the big house to help with supper while he bled in the dust. The women who scrubbed the gallery the next morning found blood on the back steps. Too much blood for a woman 7 months gone with child. They found Delphi at dawn in the hog pen, dress torn to ribbons, legs broken, the baby still inside her but no longer moving. Official cause of death? Fever. Real cause. Everybody knew and nobody said a word. They buried her before the sun was high. No box, no preacher, just a shallow hole in the slave cemetery and a mound of red clay that sank flat within a week. That night, Cato walked to the edge of the swamp and stood there until the moon went down and the stars burned out one by one. He did not cry. He did not scream. He did not pray. He listened to the water and the frogs and the slow, patient breathing of something older than any white man's law. Then he started planning. He began with the land itself. Every spare minute he walked the slopes, barefoot so he could feel the change from solid ground to sucking mud, learning the channels that shifted with every rain, the places where the water had no bottom, the cypress knees sharp enough to rip a man's belly open if he fell wrong. He learned the snakes, cottonmouths thick as his wrist that would chase a man across water, copperheads that struck without rattling, little coral snakes bright as ribbons and twice as deadly. He learned the plants, white snake root that brought shaking fever, water hemlock that stopped a heart in 4 breaths, Jimson weed that made men tear their own eyes out chasing devils only they could see. He learned silence better than any man alive. At night he moved through the quarters like smoke, stopping at certain doors, speaking so low only one person at a time could hear. "Tell nobody," he whispered to Aunt Dicey one night in October. "But the swamp is hungry." She pressed a deer-hide pouch into his hand without asking why. Inside was a root the color of old bone, knobby, dry, bitter as gall. 3 days to call a man, she said. 4 days to send him across. Don't make it 5 or he'll linger and point fingers. Cato closed his fist around the pouch. "Thank you, ma'am. Thank me when you on the other side of this child. Not before." He started with Elijah Pryor. The old man loved his evening toddy. Dark rum, hot water, sugar, a twist of lemon from the little tree in the greenhouse. Cato had served it every night for 6 years. On the 1st of November, he grated a pinch of the pale root into the sugar bowl when no one was looking. Not enough to kill quick. Enough to make a man's belly twist for days and crave cool air. Elijah Pryor took sick on the 3rd day. He sent for the doctor from New Madrid, drank laudanum by the bottle, cursed the cook, the weather, the niggers, the world. On the 10th night, he felt well enough to walk down to the landing, claiming the house was too close. The fog was thick as wool. He carried his walking stick and a lantern and told Thomas not to wait up. He never came back. They found the lantern first, floating crown down like a dead firefly. Then the walking stick wedged between 2 cypress knees. Then, 3 days later, the body 5 miles downstream, face down in 6 inches of water, one hand still clutching the gold watch that had stopped at 11:47. The doctor said heart failure brought on by drink and bad air. The colored folks said the swamp had opened its mouth and swallowed him whole, boots and all. Silas Greer posted extra patrols. He carried a Navy revolver in his belt and a bullwhip over his shoulder. He swore he'd shoot the first nigger who looked sideways. Cato looked straight ahead and kept working. Next was Elijah Jr., the eldest son, a big man with a bigger temper and fists like hams. He liked to ride into the swamp hunting runaways, drunk on corn liquor and power. Cato waited until December, when the water was cold enough to kill a man in minutes if he fell in. He left a trail, a strip of red flannel tied to a persimmon tree, a broken jug that still smelled of whiskey, a single boot print leading toward the deep slough everybody knew to avoid. Elijah Jr. followed it like a hound on a hot scent, cursing and laughing, certain he was about to catch whoever had killed his father. His horse came back at dusk, saddle empty, eyes rolling white with terror. They found the body 2 days later, sitting upright against a cypress, pants soaked with his own filth, mouth open in a scream no one heard. Black foam crusted his lips and chin. The doctor called it apoplexy. Aunt Dicey called it justice served cold. Greer doubled the patrols again. He chained dogs at every path into the swamp. He beat 3 people to death looking for answers. Nobody talked. Thomas Pryor, the youngest, the one who had laughed loudest during the 39 lashes, started sleeping with a loaded shotgun across his knees. He wrote letters to cousins in St. Louis, begging them to come fetch him. He drank himself blind every night and saw shadows at every window. Cato saved him for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, he walked into the big house through the kitchen door, bold as daylight. The cook, Ruth, who had lost 2 sons to the Pryors, looked up once and went back to stirring greens. She didn't see him slip something into the big iron pot of black-eyed peas, simmering for the white folks' New Year dinner. She didn't see him walk out again. Christmas morning, Thomas Pryor sat down to breakfast alone. He ate 3 bowls of peas because they were his favorite and because the house felt too big and too empty. By noon, he was doubled over, vomiting blood black as tar. By dusk he was dead at the table, face down in his plate, tongue swollen twice its size, eyes popped wide in permanent surprise. The house was locked from the inside, every window barred, no tracks in the frost on the gallery, just a single wet fingerprint on the white tablecloth, still tacky with swamp mud, pointing toward the open back door and the path that led down to the water. After Thomas, Pryor's Landing died fast. White neighbors talked of curses and fever and selling out before the place was unfit for Christian burial. The colored folks moved slower, packing what little they owned, looking over their shoulders at the black water breathing behind the levee. By spring of 1858, only ghosts and Cato remained. He did not live in the quarters. Those collapsed first, roofs sagging under rain and memory. He lived in the swamp itself, moving every few days, building nothing permanent. A lean-to of palmetto fronds here, a fire no bigger than a cookpot there, always gone by morning. He ate what the water gave, catfish, gar, turtle eggs, the sweethearts of palmetto, and drank from vines that held rainwater clean as glass. Word spread up and down the river. Pryor's Landing was cursed. 4 white men dead in 6 months, no marks on them, no killer caught. Slave catchers rode wide around the Bootheel. Runaways began slipping through, following rumors of a tall man with a ruined voice who could guide you across water that had no bottom. They called him the conductor now, though never to his face. You found him only if he wanted finding. You followed a single white heron that flew low ahead of you, or a line of bubbles that moved against the current, or sometimes nothing at all except the feeling that you were no longer alone. Then the whisper would come from somewhere to your left or behind you, or inside your own chest. Keep north when the moss hangs heavy. Step where the water shines black. Don't look back till the 3rd lightning tree. And somehow you arrived on the other side. Illinois, sometimes Iowa. Barefoot, half-starved, alive, and unable to say exactly how you got there. The ones who tried to pay him laughed at themselves afterward. A woman left a silver thimble tied in red thread. A boy carved a small wooden boat and set it adrift with a penny inside. They were always gone by morning, replaced sometimes by a single object. A square of red flannel, a child's shoe, a lock of hair tied with blue thread. Payment maybe, or reminder. White men put a price on his head. $500 dead, 1,000 alive, signed by the provisional governor in 1864. Handbills went up from Cape Girardeau to Memphis. The drawing showed a tall Negro with a scar across his throat and eyes that looked straight through you. Wanted Cato, alias Swamp Whisper Murderer, guide of runaways, inciter of servile insurrection dangerous. Approach with extreme caution. Bounty hunters came, some in 2s, some in dozens. They brought bloodhounds bred in Alabama, machetes to cut the vines, lanterns that burned whale oil bright enough to shame the moon. They went in talking loud, cursing the mud, the skeeters, the heat. Few came out talking at all. One who did was a Kentuckian named Breedlove, missing 3 fingers and half an ear. He sat in a tavern in New Madrid in the summer of '64, shaking so hard his whiskey sloshed over the rim. He ain't human, Breedlove told anyone who'd listen. We tracked him clean to the big lake, had him dead to rights. Dogs baying fit to wake the dead. Then the water just opened up like something big rolled over underneath. Dogs went mad, tore their own throats trying to back out of the traces. My partner swore he saw a man standing on the water, arms spread wide, and the moon went black behind him. Next thing I know, I'm running, and I ain't stopped yet. He left town before sunrise, nobody blamed him. The war came and went like a fever dream. Blue coats marched through, then gray, then blue again. In 1865, a young Union lieutenant named Amos Reed took a flatboat and 2 volunteers into the swamp searching for a family rumored to be hiding there. Mother, father, 3 small children, all marked for recapture. They found them on the 2nd day, half dead from fever, huddled under cane. The mother clutched a baby that hadn't moved in hours. Reed gave them the last of his hardtack and promised Illinois by nightfall. That was when the whisper came. Too late for that one. Reed spun, revolver half drawn. The water lay flat as glass. His men looked at each other, then at him, waiting. "Show yourself," Reed shouted. Silence. Then the surface broke 20 feet away. A man rose straight up out of the water, slow, no splash, no ripple until he was already standing. Tall, thin, dressed in rags the color of rot. Water streamed off him, but his feet never sank. The scar across his throat caught the last light of day like a red smile. Reed's volunteers backed away until the boat rocked. The man looked at the family, then at Reed, then at the baby limp in its mother's arms. "Some debts paid in full," he whispered, voice so low Reed felt it in his teeth. "Some paid in part." He stepped forward. The water held him like solid ground. Reed found his voice. "We're taking them north. You can't stop us." "I ain't trying to stop you, boy. I'm telling you what's already done." He touched the baby's cheek with one long finger, black with swamp mud. The child took one sudden breath, thin and sharp, then settled into normal sleep. Reed stared, mouth open. Cato's eyes moved to him, ancient and exhausted. "War's near over," he whispered. "Killing's near over. But remembering ain't." He turned, walked 3 steps across the water, and sank out of sight as gently as he'd risen. No swirl, no bubbles. Just gone. Reed got the family to Cairo 2 nights later. The baby lived. The mother named her Delphi. After the war, the swamp changed names on maps, Big Lake, Mingo, Duck Creek, but never changed its mind. People tried to drain it, farm it, log it. Machines rusted, men drowned, money vanished. The water always won. Freedmen settled the high ground, built churches, schools, towns with names like Freedom Ridge and New Hope. On Sunday evenings, old folks gathered on porches and told the young ones about the man who walked the water, who spoke so low only the guilty could hear him. They said he never left. They said on certain nights, when the moon is thin and the air smells of rain that won't fall, you can stand at the edge and listen. If your heart is heavy with someone else's unpaid debt, you might hear it. A voice, rough as broken glass, rubbed soft, moving over the water like wind through cattails. "I still hear. I guard who the swamp chooses, and sometimes if you're very still you might see him, just a shadow among shadows, tall and thin, standing where no man should stand. He doesn't speak anymore. He just watches, making sure the balance holds. Because some debts don't die with the debtor. Some justice is older than laws, deeper than courts, patient as cypress and black water. And some men, once they start keeping that kind of justice, never find the way back to being only men again." In the end, the handbills yellowed and tore. The reward was never claimed. The name Cato appears in no census, no pension roll, no graveyard. Only in stories. Only in whispers. Only when the fog rolls thick and the herons fly low, and somewhere out in the heart of the swamp, something tall and quiet walks the water, keeping watch, keeping count, keeping the promise he made the night Delphi died. They won't none of them see another sunrise they don't earn. And the swamp, old, slow, and absolutely impartial, makes sure the accounting is accurate. Always.